My name is Sarah Liebel and I'm an artist teacher. I have always been creating art for as long as I can remember. I also have wanted to be a teacher for as long as I can remember. I do both of these things because it's quite simple really, it makes me happy. My family and I live on a mountain surrounded by a beautiful vast forest. The natural surroundings, the wildlife, and the community are the inspiration behind my teaching and art practice. I firmly believe you must love what you do, and I know being in the classroom is where I shine. I seem to be the most creative while teaching, surrounded by children's vibrant imaginations, their dreamy innocence, and their playfulness. My art is deeply rooted in the study of children. For the last 5 years, my artist studio has been my classroom, my teachings the medium, and my students the masterpieces. I came to the University of Victoria to do my Master's of Fine Art Education, and it rekindled my creative spirits and the pursuit to tap into my artistic identity. Without my teaching practice consuming my time, I'm able to focus on me and my practice. Art is so important in my life, and it truly is my happy place. My sketchbook is where I make my imagination come to life. It's the place where I draft my plans, design my pieces, and write my thoughts. I start with a sketch and then let go of the reins. I tend to not dwell too long on the sketch and just jump in with 2 feet. I enjoy taking risks and seeing where it leads. I've always been drawn to 2- and 3-dimensional pieces and the senses they evoke. I encourage people to touch my art and run their hands over the variety of textures. I believe with the power of touch, you are able to connect with not only the art, but the artist as well. I think the teacher in me understands tactile learners and the need to see art in more than one way. I enjoy investing time on the small, intricate details in my pieces, the details that maybe a child might spend more time on or appreciate. My work is constantly changing and evolving with the milestones in my life. With the birth of our son Finn, it's evoked a new sense in my life as an artist. I am starting to see the world through Finn's eyes, the strong contrast between black and white, and the urge to create things that he connects with through touch. As I work on the pieces, I form a relationship with the materials, allowing me to bond with Finn on another level. I have the desire to show Finn my love for him through my art. I hope in the future to continue to explore my identity as an artist and a teacher. Life does not work without art, and I cannot live without it. Art and teaching are never static, and I hope to continue to enjoy the journey of discovering both of my passions. Over the course of this past year, I was given the opportunity to travel to Reggio Emilia, Italy, to experience firsthand their approach to teaching. The approach focuses on every human possessing 100 languages to express themselves. Whether if it's through painting, drawing, sculpting, writing, poetry, and more, Reggio children are offered daily opportunities to encounter many types of materials, many expressive languages, many points of view, working actively with their hands, minds, and emotions. I was able to visit the Ray of Light in the Loris Malaguzzi Center. This atelier is a place of research and experimentation, of immersion in an environment where light in its different forms can be investigated through exploration, which provokes wonder, marveling, and curiosity to stimulate creativity and deeper investigation. Walking through the lit hallway, I was able to take the role of a child in a Reggio classroom. My senses were stimulated as I explored different aspects of light. This tour was my first experience in understanding the Reggio Emilia approach as I was exploring, questioning, and discovering. This atelier heightens children's and adults' awareness of their senses and beauty. It breaks down what we think we know about materials and invites us to see them in a new way. I began to truly understand the materials I was working with. I was able to see the beauty in the process and see art as a process. I left the Ray of Light with a new perspective on the way I teach. The next exhibit we visited at the center invited children to experiment with graphic instruments, material surfaces, and story elaboration. Telling a story means exploring words, metaphors, imagery, and emotions, rhythms, and pauses, entering into a narrative dimension that plays on both reality and fiction. For teachers to conduct this investigation with their young students, it was necessary to be selective and limit the amount of material. They paired drawing instruments that would leave very different kinds of marks and sheets of paper in different textures and sizes. The teachers were asked to note perceptions, impressions, attitudes, words, stories, and the children's relationship with their classmates. Our tour led us to visit another center, the Ramita. The center collects, displays, and distributes alternative and reclaimed materials obtained from unsold stock and scrap materials of industrial production. Visitors are encouraged to repurpose these things and give them new meaning. These reclaimed materials are chosen by the Ramita for their potential to become a language for expression. There was a paper exhibit where pieces of discarded paper were a subject to be investigated and designed with by children and adults. The exhibit showcased the process of papers being soaked, dyed, ripped apart, blended, and layered together. The exhibit focused on the process, not the product. The experimental papers were artfully displayed to heighten the beauty of the work. Adopting this approach in my classroom back home, we opened a Ramita, calling it an Imagination Center. I had parents and students bring in recycled goods from home. We organized the space so students could easily take what they needed. I learned about the term loose parts exploration, coined by architect Simon Nicholson. He believes we are all creative and that loose parts in an environment will empower our creativity. As art educators, we need to inspire children with endless possibilities to explore. Our final stop in Reggio was the Diana Municipal Preschool. Even though we were touring the preschool after hours, the presence of children was clearly felt and seen through their photographs, words, and ideas in the documentation panels mounted throughout the school. Documentation allows visitors, students, parents, teachers, and community members to understand the school culture and its aims and methods. In the classroom, there was a center to replicate the Milan Expo. They created the expo using loose parts, such as screws, bolts, chains, metal pieces, rubber bits, and more. Another center in the preschool invited children to draw still images using fine point markers and pencil crayon, while another station hosted a small group of children to sculpt a chameleon using a toy model with a photograph for reference. Back home, following the trip to learn about Reggio Emilia, I was eager to apply their strategies in my own classroom. My journey with documentation took place in a kindergarten to grade 3 class at Big White Community School. I wanted to focus on documenting the children's process as they experiment and explore with a variety of mediums. I know I can't replicate the preschool programs of Reggio Emilia, as our history and culture are different. What I've tried to do is understand the philosophy and the principles of the approach and adapt them to my own situation. Over the course of the school year, I completed 4 art lessons with my students in which they were able to experiment with different medias: watercolor, acrylic, oil pastel, and objects collected from nature. I had one main objective: to document the children's dialogue and working process. At the beginning, students were reluctant to share their thinking and struggled to experiment and break the mold of what they thought was expected. At first, my documentation panels lacked photos, were crowded and cluttered. However, as time went on, the students expanded the way they experimented and were willing to take risks. Limiting the children's materials so they weren't focused on the color or making a pretty picture proved to be an effective strategy. They began to create a relationship with the materials through discovery, wonder, and exploration. My documentation panels suited our classroom environment and were meaningful to our community. Documenting our journey, I've gained insight into my students' thinking, interests, and abilities. There's too much pressure to reward a student's finished art product at the expense of the vital learning that occurs during the process of experimenting with ideas through the materials. My journey has led me to document their art making with careful listening and observation, and has highlighted the children's learning process.